Welcome to the Triple Option Pass with Ryan Gregory and Devin Voss, a part of the Running Hook Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Triple Option Pass Podcast. I'm Devin Voss, and I'm here with co-host Ryan Gregory, and we're here to deliver another episode of the Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda series. Ryan, how are we today?
I could not be any better, Devin. We're going to talk about my favorite year in college football, and we're just talking about college football. It hasn't been eliminated completely from the world yet, so I'm optimistic, and I'm ready to talk.
Yeah, it's definitely great to dive back into the past, especially with all of the grim surrounding the current college football world. So for this episode, we're featuring a team, like Ryan said, from the chaotic 2007 season, a team located on a country road near you, a team that was younger than the mountains and growing like a breeze. We're talking about the 2007 West Virginia Mountaineers.
Oh my God.
Gotta love it. You gotta love it. So it was 2007, and the Mountaineers were ranked number 3 overall to start the year. In the previous 2 seasons, West Virginia, under their prize head coach, Rich Rodriguez, they established themselves as a consistent powerhouse coming out of the Big East. In fact, through 2005 and 2006, the Mountaineers had only lost 3 games, going a staggering 22-3, which included a Sugar Bowl win in 2005 over Georgia and a win over in the Gator Bowl in 2006 over Calvin Johnson's Georgia Tech. That's a fun fact. And there's a lot to look forward to. The electrifying quarterback, Pat White, was returning from a stellar sophomore year. Steve Slayton was returning for his senior season after a 1,744 yards and 16 touchdowns the year before, and an offense which was already rated number 5 in the country in 2006 was adding a 5-star running back in Noel Devine. The defense was ranked 62nd in 2006, needed some work, but things were trending upwards. So what are your initial thoughts on West Virginia?
Well, immediately I'm thinking that Devin Voss does the best intros in podcasting landscape right now. That was incredible. But overall thoughts on West Virginia, it's not like our usual team where we think this team could be fun in regards to like preseason hype. This team had proved that they were an offensive juggernaut with the head coach that had the simplicity yet the complexity in his offense to only run a couple plays but make them damn hard to stop. And so the expectations, though they were ranked super high to start out, were weirdly low for how potent of an offense it was, and they just still continue to pump out wins and productions like crazy. It was a very interesting team in what proved to be the most interesting year in football.
Absolutely. I mean, just to sum it up before we dive into things, they finished the year 11-2, 5-2 in the Big East. They finished 6th in the AP poll, and they had actually the 32nd ranked strength of schedule, which really isn't bad in the college football world.
From being from the Big East, having the 32nd, that's not bad.
Right. And let's not forget though, at this time the Big East wasn't a joke either. I mean, not to say that they were great, but they were at least better than most of the others, not including Boise State.
For those of you that weren't college football fans around this time of the world, it's comparable to how the AAC is today. They have your UCFs, your Cincinnatis, your Houstons that will be fringe top 25 teams, can probably hang with the big boys, and also has some horrific teams that have no business being mentioned in the Power 5 conversation. So they're kind of in that Power 5 group of 5 gray area.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's basically where the American came from, the Big East. They picked up literally almost every single team from this conference. Others went elsewhere, West Virginia. They eventually joined the Big 12. And
Pitt went to the ACC.
Yeah, exactly.
Rutgers to the Big Ten.
To the Big Ten. UConn also just left.
Just dropped. Yeah,
just dropped. So, yeah, the Big East wasn't a joke. It was basically the American of today, and West Virginia was their powerhouse. Now, this just isn't. Yeah, there's nothing, at least to this day, that probably compares to them besides for maybe UCF. This team was just flat out good, and the AP noticed it, and they actually ranked them high, unlike, the current system we have today.
Yeah, they were a lot more liberal with giving out high rankings back in like the early to mid 2000s.
Thanks, BCS.
Yep, thank you, BCS. We relied a lot more on computers. Now it's all opinion.
Yeah, now it's just all opinion.
Now it's all people being rational and telling me that the 3-1 Auburn team is probably better than someone in the American, but you shut your mouth. I will not hear that over Memphis.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You know what? This is a separate conversation, but the BCS, for the bad rap it gets, it did a damn good job at what it was designed for. And it gave us some damn good memories and some damn good games.
It got it right more times than not.
Exactly.
The times it didn't were its downfall and what people remember.
It was the times it did it, the entire nation was on fire. Okay.
Yeah.
Whenever school got messed out of the playoff or the national championship, all hell broke loose. But
poor Boise.
Yeah, exactly. Boise State. But anyways, this West Virginia team, 39.6 points per game. That's quite a lot of points. Held opponents, that in fact, that was ninth. Held opponents to 18.1 points per game, 8th in the country. And if you are counting, that is a plus 280 margin.
You're going to win a lot of football games if you're outgaining opponents like that.
Yeah. 15 points for and only 235 points against. That's just ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. How did they lose to Pitt?
I don't know. But they ended up
this team. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. I was just gonna throw in since you love SP Plus, there's 6 in SP Plus. I'm sure
that's what I was gonna say. Look at us.
Yep.
That is podcast chemistry right there.
Go on. You go on.
6 in overall SP Plus, and they ranked 8th in both offensive and defensive overall. So essentially, what that says is they weren't a fake being up as high. I really thought they'd be higher than 8th in offense, but this was also the year of everyone scoring at will. So I guess it's not entirely shocking that they were 8th. But still, this wasn't like a fluke team where like UCF in 2017, the numbers didn't love them. They were somewhere in the teens, I believe, in overall. But this team was 6th, so West Virginia was for real.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind, this team, the eventual champions, the LSU Tigers, West Virginia was only 0.7 points behind them, in SP Plus. And shockingly enough, USC had the highest at 32.
Yeah, USC was the best team in football that year by the numbers.
By far, dude. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even close. The next closest was Oklahoma, who got absolutely waxed by West Virginia in the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, so what are the numbers now?
Yeah. So that's for later. But this team, it was definitely nothing to mess with. I mean, they averaged 159 passing yards a game on 20 attempts at 66%. And then
they really didn't need to pass a whole lot.
No, not at all, because they averaged 297 rushing yards a game.
That is ridiculous.
6.2 a carry and 3.8 rushing touchdowns.
I'd like to mention, like, triple option teams that don't throw the ball at all don't average anywhere near that many rushing yards.
I know.
They'll get like somewhere in the 220 range. Like West Virginia was a team that was running the spread, quote unquote, because it was a lot of zone read, spread option. But still, they were still a passing threat, and he ran for that many yards. Rich Rod is all of his shortcomings as a head coach, he is an offensive genius.
He really is. I mean, if you add that up, they were averaging 456 yards per game, which averages out to about 6.6 yards per play in a very small 1.6 turnovers per game.
That part's the best. The fact that they ran the ball that much on options and rarely coughed it up, minus like the Louisville game and obviously the Pitt game.
Yeah. And as far as defense goes, it was also rock solid. Now, this is kind of a shock because, like I mentioned before, they were 62nd the year before. But this year, they really stepped the game up. I mean,
they returned 10 starters from that 06 team.
Yeah. And it proved to be just incredible. I mean, they limited teams to 188 passing yards a game on 56% passing, which is not good. And they held opponents to only 112 rushing yards a game. I mean, in total, 301 yards a game from their opponents. That's plus 154 yards for West Virginia.
I was going to say, with your offense cooking that much, if you hold your opponents to maybe 14 a game, you're probably going to win that game. Minus the Pitt game.
Minus the Pitt game.
We have a lot of time that we need to spend on that. But
don't worry.
My metric for measuring good defensive players as far as like linebacking core goes is just sheerly number of tackles.
Yep.
And I know it's like the most boring. Here's like, oh, the stats don't tell everything. But I feel like a certain threshold means that you can't be bad. And that's surpassing triple digits in the tackle number. And West Virginia had a guy with 107 in Reed Williams and a guy with 98 in Morty Ivy. So this linebacking core, all three of them, the third one whose name escapes me at the moment, all three of them were bona fide starters for like at least a year. And this defense kind of centered around them, and they always set the pace. And that's what made this defense so hard to beat, is those guys were just flying around. They could handle just about everything going up the middle, and they essentially were just good enough elsewhere to hold things in check.
I mean, exactly. I mean, Reed Williams, Morty Ivy, and then the guy the name escape was Mark Magro. Yeah. And they all combined for, let me see, 8, 6, 14, about 20 sacks. Or sorry, not 20. Over 20, about 25-ish tackles for loss, and
that's enough chaos to win your team games.
15 sacks. I mean, that's pretty good, especially when you got a defensive lineman and Johnny Dingle, who had 48 tackles, 19 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles.
All-time last name.
Dingle. Yeah.
I pray he never becomes a school teacher.
I know. I agree.
But let's get into the specifics real quick of Rich Rod and his offense.
Yeah.
Just because for those that aren't familiar with his work, whether it be West Virginia, Michigan, Arizona, he is essentially the inventor and proprietor of the zone read. And if you've ever played like the NCAA football games or the newest editions of Madden, it's essentially when the quarterback takes a snap, has the running back to his left or right, and has the option to either give to him on a handoff, or he can read what the defensive end's doing. If the defensive end crashes on the running back, he can pull it and run it himself. And so it's an offense made for an overly athletic quarterback and obviously a good running back. And at a place like West Virginia, you're not going to pull in elite recruiting classes every year, and the pieces just happen to fall together where they get future NFL players at quarterback, running back, fullback, and also their freshman 5-star that they pulled in once they had some success. So it was really the stars aligning for Rich Rod here, having Pat White, who could rush for more yards than his running back at quarterback, Slayton at running back, a future pro, Owen Schmidt, who was devastating if he was the lead blocker for Pat White. If he was in front of him on a play, you could almost guarantee that he was going to get 4 to 5 more yards.
Yep.
And then Noel Devine, the 5-star running back that they brought in, was just that extra punch of energy when Slayton was either not hitting on all cylinders or just needed a break. Having the 4 of them in one backfield running Rich Rodriguez's offense, I'm shocked they didn't score 50 points a game. They were so potent at all times. It must have been horrifying for other defensive coordinators to think about stopping that.
Absolutely. I mean, let's just take a second on Pat White. I mean, this is a do-it-all guy. I mean, for a run-heavy offense,
he came in the league too early.
He did, but he like for a run-heavy offense, he passed for 1,700 yards on 66%, 14 touchdowns, and a minimal 4 interceptions. I mean, that's ideal.
He was a good passer.
Yeah, he was. And to even further that, he ran for 1,335 yards, 14 touchdowns, and carried it 6.8 yards per carry.
Let's mention that's a team leading 1,300 yards on the ground.
Yeah, a team leading from the quarterback. This guy was dual threat.
This isn't Navy. This isn't Navy.
No.
He was also asked to throw the ball. Pat White was one of the most prolific quarterbacks of our recent time. And had he not been drafted in, 2009?
Yep.
Then his career could have had an entirely different trajectory if coaches would have known how to use him. It always sucks to go to Miami because it's Miami.
Yep. Yep. You're not wrong there. He got some action.
He and Chad Pennington were in a quarterback battle at one point. Miami is not a great place to be playing quarterback.
No. But before we move on from the statistics, we got to mention one special guy. I mean, we're talking about...
I know where this is going.
We're talking about the greatest of all time in the punting game. One of the GOATs in the podcasting game. Pat McAfee. The Mountaineer, who was a do-it-all guy. He was kicking field goals, kicking
Pitt's
extra points,
kicker.
punting, everything. He was everything on special teams.
Yeah, he's Pitt's favorite kicker, Pat McAfee.
Yeah.
Oh, it's too soon?
Yeah, too soon. Too soon. Yeah.
He was an unfair leg to have on a team that was also that efficient, too. If someone managed to stop them, Pat's like, all right, cool, I'll bang one out from 45.
Seriously, I mean, he was 13 of 19 on field goals. He wasn't, he wasn't a kicker, but he came in, he did what he had to do. He converted on, most of the tries. And he punted ridiculous. Just exactly what you want from, a guy like him.
Exactly.
So, I did want to put some side notes in here.
Please do.
West Virginia, they were 9th in total offense, 8th in total defense, 5th in forced turnovers, 15th in points allowed, 18th in rushing yards allowed, 7th in total offense. LSU is 3rd, 11th in first downs allowed. Now, their offense, they were 3rd in rushing in the nation behind Navy and Air Force. That's
good company.
Yep. And this is the stat that just kind of explodes your mind. They were in front of a team in 4th in Arkansas who had Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, and Peyton Hillis.
That Arkansas team.
And they ran better than they did.
Yeah.
No. That's 3 NFL starters.
Wouldn't you love to see those 3 playing for Rich Rod? Someone who wants to run the ball and is very run friendly.
I'd
love to see this West Virginia team behind that Arkansas O-line.
Ooh.
Having SEC bodies in front of you. That's got to add an extra yard per carry easy.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Well, we can just wish at this point.
Yeah, we can just wish at this point. And on just one more note, in 2006, just for comparison's sake, They were fifth in the country in offense, second in rushing, and compare that to 2005, and you can see how big of jumps this team had in 2005. So Pat White's, I think it was his freshman year. It was
doing some math. Yes, his freshman year.
Yeah, they were 50th in offense, but still fourth in rushing.
Yeah, Pat didn't start until midway through that season.
Yeah. So, I mean, they expanded. He expanded his game. They expanded their game. And in 2007, all the stars aligned. I mean, there's little doubt in the Mountaineers' mind that this was their year. And boy, did they show up in that first game against Western Michigan. Now, I know it's Western Michigan, but they laid an absolute ass whooping on the Broncos.
They did.
542 yards, 316 on the ground, 226 through the air. They won 62-24. But more importantly, Pat White, he only completed 10 passes for 192 yards and 2 touchdowns.
He was also ridiculously efficient in this game. Like, speaking from like just an only statistical look, Pat White may have played a perfect football game here. Like, his completion percentage could have been better, but as far as his rushing efficiency and passing efficiency, he played like you were playing on freshman mode in NCAA 14.
Seriously, he only had
he averaged 11 yards a carry.
Exactly. He had 9 attempts on the ground and had 97 yards and 2 touchdowns.
So stupid. And a good omen for the defense going forward is they allowed a grand total of 32 yards on 32 carries from Western Michigan, which is the funniest stat I've ever heard. That you're just like pounding your head into a wall. You're just like, I might break one here sometime, and it's consistently a yard.
How do you just keep running the ball when it's just not working? Like, at some point, you just got to tell yourself, just cut the cord. Just start passing the ball. Who cares at that point? I mean, it was 62-24. There's no chance.
This is our usual opening season cupcake. West Virginia wins 62-24. They start the season ranked third and improve it by absolutely obliterating Western Michigan.
Yeah, and then next they move on to the Friends of the Coal Bowl game against the good old rival Marshall. And again,
we love the Thundering Herd at this podcast, so this wouldn't hurt us to see.
Yes, no slander, but there's no denying this was just another ass whooping.
Ass whooping, obviously.
West Virginia steamrolls for 511 yards, 362 on the ground, and another.
They ran it better against a better team.
I know, and 149 through the air. And in a round to a 48-23 win. Steve Slayton goes freaking wild, man, this game. And
and also Pat White rushed for only 20 yards less than Steve Slayton in this one. Slayton goes for 146. Pat goes for 125.
It was a Heisman performance for Pat right here. I mean,
oh, absolutely. He threw for $150 and 2 touchdowns, and then rushed for as much as I said and another score. At this point, to be fair, Marshall was not great. This was immediately post Chad Pennington, and this was pre Doc Holliday, and so they were kind of reeling.
Yeah, I mean, really for the next 2 weeks, it's kind of more of the same, more ass whooping. I mean, they beat Maryland 31-14, which is their first, I guess you could say, quote unquote, true test from an ACC team. And East Carolina.
We should say the score was not indicative of how bad Maryland got their ass whooped in that game.
Yeah.
Because also Maryland sub 100 passing yards, sub 200 or sub 100 rushing yards, sub 200 passing yards, as West Virginia ran for 350 and obliterated them on the ground.
Yeah, and honestly, this was the welcoming party for Noel Devine. I mean,
it was
5 carries and gained 136 yards.
We cannot stress enough how ridiculous of a stat line that is. 5 carries and 136 yards.
That dude was just running all over them. And it was only
That's a
in 5 carries.
27-yard average. And no touchdowns. How messed up is
No
that?
touchdowns. What is that? Can't they just load him up on the line and give him
Were they
one?
only giving it to him on their own 15? Why was 30 yards a pop not enough to score a touchdown once?
I questioned the same thing. I was like, this dude had 5 carries for 136 yards and he couldn't get him in the end zone.
You know what I noticed in chewing the film for this? Steve Slayton is just a touchdown whore. Pat White would do all of the work and carry them the entirety of the way down the field. Yep. And then Slayton would get a carry on the 3 and score. And they'd be like, woo, Steve. And I'm sure Pat's on the sideline like, this motherfucker. I ran it the entirety of the field. I separated my shoulder twice on this possession. And he scores the touchdown.
Yeah, literally. I mean, and the funny thing about this game to me was, I mean, Pat White only threw 8 times. They didn't need him to throw. God forbid. They did not. I mean, he only had 95 yards, but it doesn't matter. Because
a name that we'll notice from this Maryland team as well. Darius Hayward-Bay was playing wide receiver at the time.
Darius Hayward-Bay.
Was a tremendous bust.
Yeah, he was.
Was he drafted by the Raiders and it didn't work? Or did he get traded to the Raiders and it didn't work?
Yeah, he was with the Raiders. All I honestly remember from him was Raiders, Steelers, Colts, and then gone. That's all I remember.
Yep.
That's all I remember.
Al Davis's his theory of this guy's fast, come play for me, didn't work with Darius Hayward-Bay.
Nope, it did not.
And then on to the most unfair matchup. I'd say worse than the Western Michigan game. Their last out-of-conference game.
Yeah.
Their last warm-up game. They had Mississippi State later. But Eastern Carolina came to West Virginia. And oh, boy. Oh, man, was it ugly.
Bloodbath. Yeah.
Props to them for showing up. Pat White decided to throw against them. And they were probably like, huh? Why?
Yeah, the Mountaineers gained 599 yards to East Carolina's 160.
You know what's ridiculous? Let me read you Pat White's stat line from this game.
All right, yeah.
20 attempts, 18 completions, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks, QBR of 199 out of a possible 200. I'm sure those DBs, they load the box. They'd have probably one safety in the box at all times. And Pat White comes out throwing. They're probably just like, what's happening?
It worked so well. And then
this is Chris Johnson's ECU as well. They play a lot of notable names this season.
Oh my goodness. Again. This team was just steamrolling. I mean, granted, this team, I mean, these are, the most lofty opponents, but just ridiculous.
And we say all this to say there was no stumbling blocks that had been seen yet. We hadn't been like, oh, looks like West Virginia, someone found out how to get them off their game, or, oh, West Virginia didn't look strong against this opponent. They steamrolled 4 opponents in a row doing exactly what they wanted, and then they got to week 5 against South Florida.
Yeah, now for the good stuff, right?
All right, Devin's going to take this part away. He wrote a lot of notes about this, and he told me in prep that he was very excited. So this is the Devin Voss hour. Everyone sit back and enjoy. I hope he uses his ESPN 30 for 30 voice.
Oh, you – okay.
Are you going to do it?
I'll do it just for you. But,
oh, yes. You're in for a treat, folks.
All right, I'll do it until I'm done. All right.
Perfect.
Everything thus far had led to week 5, a week the Mountaineers and their fans alike had circled on their schedule from day 1. It was time to play at number 18 USF. The Bulls were no joke. Up to this point, they had walked both number 20. Oh, I messed that up. Auburn, a game which they won 26-23, and North Carolina. Not only that, but they were the reason the Mountaineers didn't wind up in a BCS bowl game the year before. And a shocking late season defeat. USF, who at the time were 7-4, won 24-19. So for USF, this was a prove-it game against the 5th-ranked team in the nation. And West Virginia, well, it was personal. See, they wanted 2 things. First, revenge. Second, to also prove themselves. Again, up to this point, West Virginia had faced cupcake opponents, and the AP noticed it. Despite their undefeated record, they dropped from number 3 in the country to number 5. And while that's not a big drop, this was their opportunity to assert themselves in the national conversation. An opportunity to defeat a ranked Big East Conference opponent. The anticipation for this game was riveting. In fact, USF delivered their first ever sellout crowd for the event. First ever. And the crowd was deafening. USF head coach Jim Levitt was doing full field sprints just before the start to try and pump his players up. And the level
one of the better clips I've ever seen. Sorry, continue.
You're fine. The level of excitement transferred over to the game, too. And boy, when I say this game was a game, it was a game. I know that just totally, yeah.
I'm sold.
It was gritty. It was low scoring. It was all defense. Both teams were so amped that it led to an incredibly sloppy first half. In fact, here's a 6-drive summary, which eventually includes the first score. USF, fumble. West Virginia, turnover on downs. USF, fumble. West Virginia, fumble. USF, interception. West Virginia, interception, pick 6. Now, the pick 6 was probably the greatest moment in USF history. Just gonna point that one out there. That interception return touchdown by Ben Moffitt just set the crowd into just a freaking frenzy. I mean, I would love to know how many decibels the crowd reached on that play because the camera was shaking. And then people on the ground were saying that the ground was shaking. I mean, it was insane. And then a few drives later, Matt Groff just launches this ridiculous 55-yard touchdown pass to Carlton Mitchell. I mean, when you actually watch the play, it was like he almost tripped and fell from a sack, maintained upright, and just threw a deep pass across his body to open Mitchell. And once again, the crowd was just ablaze. And USF was up 14-0 with 9:43 left in the second quarter.
For those of you listening at home, his sack avoidance into the deep ball was reminiscent of that Eli Manning Super Bowl pass when he was like literally on the ground. Someone had him by the back of his collar, and then he just hoists it deep, and Tyree catches it, the helmet catch.
Yep, exactly.
It was reminiscent of that. Like he was all the way tackled.
Yeah, it was very reminiscent. I was, watching it, it was like, how did he just escape that? And then how did he deliver a perfect dart on the run across his body? Like that was like such a Johnny Manziel thing to do, even though this was before Johnny. But from there on out, it was honestly just a game of catch-up for West Virginia. I mean, all the turnovers added up. They had 4 at the half. They found themselves fortunate enough to only be down 14, and to close the half, Pat McAfee nailed a 36-yarder, which closed the gap to 11 and making the score 14-3. However, on that exact drive, West Virginia lost Pat White for the rest of the game due to an ankle injury, which ended up thrusting backup quarterback Jarrett Brown into the game to try and erase that bruising deficit. But unfortunately for the Mountaineers, of course, USF came out at halftime and scored right away, giving them a 21-3 lead. So whatever was just happy, it just got crushed. And West Virginia answered with a field goal. So, I mean, 21-6 isn't half bad, but it's not great. And then West Virginia's defense really just kicked into overdrive, man. I mean, this defense, they forced USF to punt. And then now here's the killer. This just killed me. West Virginia's defense shows up. The Mountaineers, they make it all the way to the USF 7-yard line Especially after an explosive 37-yard run by Noel Devine. And on 2nd and goal, backup quarterback Jarrett Brown threw a freaking interception for the Mountaineers' 5th turnover. Now this touchdown would have changed the entirety of the game. There's no doubt about that. But if that is 6, man, I think West Virginia wins the game. I mean, from this point out, USF does not score another point. Like, West Virginia's defense, just complete total lockdown. That score would have changed the entirety of the momentum. But instead, it flips. The field flips, and West Virginia's defense, even after the turnover, stop them again, force the USF to punt. And once again, West Virginia, they, piddle a little right to the USF side of the field. Let's just say that, including an incredible 20 yards, gaining 20 yards on a 3rd and 24. So it was 4th and 4, do or die. Not really yet, but still. And
essentially,
Jarrett Brown, essentially, Jarrett Brown throws another interception, another, giving USF the ball back, with 13:34 left. And here's another quite interesting story. West Virginia's defense stood tall again, forcing USF to punt the ball. And this time, the offense actually scored a TD. But here's the issue. It took them 5 minutes to get to the end zone. Now, of course, as we explained, this offense is a run-heavy offense. They're pretty much doing, they're doing read option, they're doing zone, they're doing triple option, and you got your backup quarterback in the game. So he's already thrown 2 interceptions. You kind of have no choice but to run the ball, but it was still their Achilles heel just in this moment, because that left them with only 5 minutes in the game, and they still had to score another touchdown and a 2-point conversion just to tie it. And West Virginia's defense shows up again, gets the ball back for the offense, 2:32 remaining. Now, at first it looked like West Virginia was going to score. I mean, they quickly moved from their 30 to the USF 44 in just a little bit over a minute. And in that little sequence, Jarrett Brown pulled off some heroic stuff, man. I mean, he ran for 27 yards on a freaking 4th and 11 to get to the USF 44. And at this point,
ridiculous play. Go look that play up.
It was. And if you're a West Virginia fan, you're like, man, we're going to win this game. I mean, how could you not believe that at this point? Because like a play like that, even at, USF, that's just a big play. And unfortunately, the next 4 plays were as follows: 5-yard completion, sack, incomplete. So USF did it. They defeated the Mountaineers once again and vaulted themselves to number 6 in the AP poll. And as for West Virginia, I mean, they only dropped to number 13. The season wasn't over, and it's crazy to think, but this was only game 5. They still had 7 more games to go.
Yeah, this is an incredibly frustrating loss for West Virginia, just because when you break it down and look at like the numbers, they had 6 turnovers. They outgained South Florida by more than 150 yards, and they lost their starting quarterback and had to play catch up the entire second half, and they lost by 8 points. That tells you that if they play this game 10 more times, they probably win about 8 or 9 of them. And this is just one of the situations where everything went South Florida's way, including injury luck, which can never be accounted for. And they were just managed to hold on.
Yeah.
It makes this such a frustrating loss for a team with national championship aspirations.
Seriously, though, I mean, it's almost incredible how it all played out. I mean,
how lucky South Florida got. They did not play a good game.
No. I mean, to their credit, I mean, they won they
did
won
what
the
they had to
turnover
do.
battle.
They won the damn game.
They
Credit
won the
where credit's
game.
due.
They did what they had to do. But yeah, I mean, they won the turnover battle, but it was still 6-4.
Hardly. Yeah.
6-4. I mean,
hardly.
It wasn't pretty. And yeah, I mean, what a win for USF. I mean, this USF would eventually go on to be number 2 in the country.
Well, that's a story for another day.
Yep, that's a story for another day, but it's just interesting to note.
Shout out to Rutgers, who dethroned them eventually.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep, Rutgers.
Hilarious.
Rutgers dethroned number 2 USF in a trend that we will talk about later.
The curse of number 2.
The curse of number 2. And for the most part,
sorry, go ahead.
No, for the most part, the rest of the season was honestly just a cakewalk. I mean, they had some tough games here and there, but
they had ranked games, but they were cakewalks compared to full strength West Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, they defeated Syracuse 55-14 the week after losing to USF.
Really needed that.
They did. They defeated.
White was still hurt too, and got hurt again with a separate injury.
And Jarrett Brown pulling through. I mean, even though he had that rough game against USF, he was honestly a good backup for that system.
Yeah. And Pat White in the Syracuse game, he got knocked out in the third with some kind of muscle injury in his chest. And despite coming out mid-third, 88 rush yards and a touchdown, 148 pass yards and a touchdown. The man was – he's just so good. Battling an already injured ankle on a week's notice.
Yeah.
Beats up on Syracuse and then goes out with an injury again.
I mean, honestly, it sucks that he got injured, but I'm sure he is probably about to, head out of the game anyways.
Yep. Thank God for week 7 being a bye.
Yeah. Yeah, really. They needed the break.
Week 7 comes and goes. Everyone gets a little time to recharge. And the media shows that they haven't forgotten about good old West Virginia. All it takes is showing, hey, when we got our guys, we're still pretty good. And that beat up of Syracuse, by the way, 55-14 was the final there. They climb up to number 8 for their matchup with Mississippi State.
Yeah, an SEC team. This is huge, honestly, for West Virginia.
A bad SEC team, but SEC nonetheless.
Yeah, it's a bad, but when you step into any SEC opponent minus Vanderbilt, you're going to have a competitive game. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Poor Vandy.
But
we hate Vandy on this podcast.
Yeah, we do hate Vandy.
I feel like I need to buy a T-shirt or something just to show that I don't actually hate them. I just hate how they play football.
Yeah, we wish you were better at football, Vandy.
Great baseball team, Vandy. Mad props.
No business being in the SEC in football. Mm-mm. No business at all. But props to you for sticking through the pain.
Every podcast, I swear.
I'm telling you, Vandy goes to the American, they'll have a good program. That's all I'm saying. Every
just
single
makes more
time.
Sense.
Every single time I'll say that. I mean, it fits geographically. Everything works out.
And talently.
I mean, they would be a good American team, and that's something you can ask for. That's something you can ask for. But
all right, let's get to this cowbell matchup against the Bulldogs. This is the stupidest tradition in football. How do you let the fans bring cowbells in? That's so distracting.
Well, it was 38-13, so really there's not a whole lot to talk about besides.
Was this a home game or was this at West Virginia?
This is
a home game, so the bells didn't make a difference.
Yeah. Pat White doesn't really need to pass the ball. He throws an interception, which is kind of rare besides for the USF game, but he still throws 2 touchdowns despite only having 61 yards through the air. But
jump out to a 31-0 advantage to start the game is pretty solid.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. They had Steve Slayton running 127 yards, touchdown. Pat White had only 5 carries, 89 yards on 5 carries, everyone. That's 17.8 yards a carry.
Welcome to the Rich Rod offense.
Yeah.
Sometimes all it takes is a couple carries to get you in the 100 yards area.
Yep. Jarrett Brown also thrown into the action. 38 yards as far as running. Really, it's not like some crazy spectacular stat game for anyone here, but it was just a good win.
Beat up on an SEC team.
Yeah, pretty much.
Had to feel good.
It definitely had to feel good. Really,
so
a key contributing factor to that is they won the turnover battle this time around. I mean, they forced Mississippi State to 3 turnovers to their 1, and so just what happened.
So with that win, West Virginia climbs to number 6 in the polls, and we see them go up against the daunted, the ever dominant, the football powerhouse since the inception of football in America, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, ranked 25 in the nation. Greg Schiano has them rolling, and then they score 3 points at home.
Yeah, and this is just to put it out there. I mean, despite that they're Rutgers, they had Ray Rice on this team. They had Kenny Britt on this team. I mean, these are some legitimate NFL players who got some legitimate minutes and some legitimate stats in the NFL.
And let's not forget on defense, they had I'm pretty sure they still had the McCourty brothers at this time.
Let me check.
Of Patriots lore, I'm fairly certain
yes, Devin McCourty's there. And
Jason would have been there at the same time.
Yep,
They're twins.
Jason McCourty's there. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, Jason McCourty's there too.
So yeah, a lot of names on this Rutgers team that scored 3 points against West Virginia while at home.
a lot of names on the team. I did want to throw out the fact that Ryan Mundy is West Virginia safety. We didn't bring that up, but he was also a pretty good NFL player. But yeah, this was another no competition.
Ray Rice went for a cool 142, but also on 30 carries, so that kind of diminishes the returns there.
Yeah. I mean, also to that point, Pat White had a ridiculous 156 yards on 22 carries. And
significantly better.
Significantly better than the future All-Pro Ray Rice. It was just a game, but still just definitely worth noting. Steve Slayton, another game, another 3 touchdowns, kind of typical of him. And yeah, I mean that's really pretty much to sum it up. I mean, Pat White threw 144 yards on 62%. It's just another game. Rutgers, another 4 turnovers. So I mean, this West Virginia defense.
West Virginia with 0 in this game.
Yeah, and this West Virginia defense, ever since that second half of the USF game, they've really turned it on.
And so now, moving on, they stay stationary at number 6 in the nation, even after a bye week in week 10. So now it's week 11, and Louisville comes to town. And this, to me, was more interesting than any other Big East game outside of the South Florida game and obviously the Pitt game. But, I mean, Rutgers already came to town ranked. Cincinnati will later come to town ranked, as will UConn. But I think Louisville was a much more important game than any of those.
Yeah.
Because if you look at 06, when they met, Louisville was number 5 in the nation, and they still had their future second-round pick quarterback, Brian Braun. And they were still a really good team, and that shows at the 38-31 final here. This was one of the games that I was really paying attention to when I was rewatching things, because it was something that doesn't happen often where someone made a comeback on West Virginia. And so I wanted to see the logistics behind that. And at the end of the day, it was just Louisville had a pro-ready quarterback, which is always nice. But
yeah, Brian Brum. They also had a stellar tight end, Gary Barnyard Dog Barnage, catching passes.
That was good.
Future Browns legend for like 2 years.
Oh, yeah, Gary Barnage.
Gary Barnage. But yeah, like you said, this was quite the game. And West Virginia, in another situation as last year, came in to, get some revenge. And just like what had happened with USF, Louisville actually threatened them, which I find
For those of you
interesting.
who think that Brian Brom sounds familiar, his brother is Jeff, current coach of Purdue. Brian is the offensive coordinator currently. Hence the Louisville connection. He was at Western Kentucky with him for a bit.
Indeed. Louisville, they bring a lot of different people around. A lot of interesting people.
Good old Brian Brom threw for 350 yards in this game. So that if that tells you how they were able to make a comeback on West Virginia. West Virginia jumps out to a 14-point lead, and Brian Brom said, "All right, I'll sling that thing," and he did.
He did. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
Yeah, the 2 picks weren't great.
No, and he definitely slung that thing. I mean, 46 attempts. That's a lot of attempts for a college quarterback.
In rewatching that, he looks like a pro. You can see why he got picked in the second round.
Fair. Yeah, that's definitely
Things did not work out. Things definitively did not work out. But he looked pro ready, to his credit.
Yes. That is definitely fair. And so did Pat White, who
As did Pat White, also future second round pick just a year later.
Pat White,
150 yards on the ground, man.
another 150 yards on the ground and a touchdown. And
180 through the air, 2 touchdowns, no picks.
Steve Slayton had really been slowing down.
Yeah, that was a worrying factor by this part in the season.
Yeah, I really don't know what was going on, but he was really slowing down. Like
from the tape, ends were biting on him almost every time when they were running the read. Hence why Pat White had 24 carries in this game. It's just because they were like, if Pat White's going to beat us, we've seen him get hurt. We'll let him run it and hope that we can get a good shot on him. That was essentially bounty, essentially, but it was your only way that you could have a chance at beating West Virginia because Steve Slayton's going to pop right up. He's used to taking those hits. Whereas Pat White, if you leave him open, he's shown that he doesn't exactly handle that physicality as well, as we saw in the South Florida game, as we saw in the Syracuse game. And so for a lot of teams, your best bet is let's hope Pat White, messes up his shoulder again, and they have to put in that their backup, and they'll have to try and throw it or something or along those lines.
Well, let's just say, unfortunately for those teams, a certain 5-star running back would eventually emerge as a star in the backfield.
Mr. Noel.
Who just absolutely started tearing things up, but that's for a different story.
Or for another day.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, 38-31 win for Louisville. For West Virginia
Louisville.
over Louisville. And this led up to a date against number 21 ranked Cincinnati.
Quick thing of note, Pat White scored the game-winning touchdown with a minute left from 50 yards out against Louisville. And that's one of the coolest plays that I remember watching. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, so this is Brian Kelly's
Cincy.
They finished the year 10-3, so it's definitely good to note that they were a good team.
This is their last loss of the season. They didn't lose again.
Yeah, and they had quite a lot of playmakers on the field.
I mean, Pat White in West Virginia again just proved to be too much for them, though. Pat White didn't have a great game passing the ball, but again shows up for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Slayton wakes up for 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, poor Cincinnati did their damnedest as a team that came in overmatched. They put up 400 yards on them.
Yeah, Ben Mauck
was throwing that damn
crazy
thing.
Yeah, 323 yards and 2 touchdowns. 2 weeks in a row, a quarterback is passed all over that defense.
To be fair, they're two pretty solid quarterbacks in quarterback-friendly offenses, but still, giving up 350 consecutively is a tough look.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough look. And despite this, they still prevailed. They got that game-winning touchdown, and they win 28-23, and a win over another ranked opponent, 21 nonetheless, for next week's date against number 20 Connecticut.
Pause one more time. Shout out to Marcus Barnett in this game. Had 210 yards receiving for Cincinnati.
Yeah.
That's the most Brian Kelly thing I've ever heard. Hey, this guy's doing good. Let's just feed him the ball.
Yep.
And it worked.
Yep, I know all about that.
A 210 piece is, it happens at Notre Dame, but especially at Cincy. When Brian Kelly found his guy that could make plays, he's like, cool. You cool with doing everything? Awesome.
Pretty much. I mean, when I think about that certain situation, I think back to Kaiser's last year when they were just absolutely feeding the ball to Equitamius St. Brown. Just nearly every play. They were just
as
constantly, as he should with a 6'5" receiver. But regardless, they move on to the next week versus number 20, the daunting UConn. I honestly have no idea how
everyone
this team
at home let that sink in real quick. UConn underneath Edsall was 20 at one point in 2007.
I have no idea how. I mean, I know they finished 9-4, but maybe just West Virginia was just that leaps and bounds better than UConn. But even then, I still don't think, I don't know. It's tough to say.
We shouldn't give any credit to UConn here. It was just happenstance, and then they ran into an actual good team, and they got smoked.
Yeah, and West Virginia clawed their way back up to number 4 by this point.
That's right. They came into this game number 4.
And it was just a maul.
Pat White almost rushed for 200 yards. If that tells you anything about the quality of UConn.
Pretty much. Yep.
As the story has gone recently, it's been Pat White does bare minimum in the passing game because he doesn't need to, and then everyone just has fun running the ball. Minus Slayton. Slayton held to just 54 on 10 carries. Noel Devine got more touches.
Yeah, 1, but he made a hell of a lot more with it.
I think it's just noteworthy that the freshman, whether he is a 5-star or not, got more touches than the All-American.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, at the start of the podcast, Slayton was a 1,700-yard guy. And just all of a sudden on this back half of the season, I mean, for reasons that
sputters out.
Ryan mentioned, and as well as just maybe his overall performance, he was just sputtering out. And Noel Devine was establishing himself. He'd finally gotten quite a lot of games under his belt now. And his talent was really starting to show out. I'll definitely say that. But regardless, the veteran had 10 carries, 54 yards, and had 2 touchdowns. TD Vulture. Sounds like TD Vulture. But
TD Vulture, that's exactly who he is.
Devine had only 1 more carry, 11 carries, for 118 yards and a touchdown as well. So
I don't know if we said the score at the top of this, but West Virginia beasts on UConn. They beat them 66-21.
Yeah.
And that leads us – they went from 66 points to Pitt Week.
And also, just last note, West Virginia gained the most yards of their entire season in a game in this UConn game. They gained 624 yards and 517 yards on the freaking ground. That's
right.
Astonishing. Astonishing.
I just clicked back to my notes and I have it in all caps: 500 yards of rushing.
Astonishing. But
against a ranked football team. This team was ranked as one of the best in the land. And West Virginia said, that's cute. And then ran for 500 yards.
dismantled. Just dismantled.
And that win got them the Big East title. They secured it right there.
They secured it, and they've moved to number 2 in the country. Now, it should be noted that by this point, West Virginia, like I just said, navigated their way back. But for incredible reasons that won't be explained in that will be explained in an entirely different series about the 2007 college football season, they were ranked number 2. And all they needed was one victory in the last game of the season to secure a trip to the BCS National Championship. Now, when you think about it, this team came in with national title aspirations. Those seemingly got crushed with a loss to USF, who had also fallen off. They were about 3 losses by now. And oddly enough, this same week, the number 1 team in the country was Missouri. And behind both Missouri and West Virginia was 11-1 Ohio State. The week before that, LSU and Kansas were number 1 and 2.
Yep.
The week before that, LSU and Oregon were 1 and 2.
Poor Oregon. They're a sob story that needs to be addressed in a different pod.
Whoever held the number 2 spot in the 2007 season, cursed. There's just a complete curse on it. And this applied to the number 2 ranked West Virginia Mountaineers as they ended up losing.
We just got a message from our producer that said, Kansas, ? Kansas, ? The Jayhawks, ?
Yep, the Jayhawks.
Yes, Alex. The Kansas Jayhawks were at one point the second best team in football and then immediately blew it in Kansas style.
Yep. Well, to be fair, like we said, number 2 completely just cursed. But this game was ugly. And since I took away the USF game, Ryan, I'll let you dive into the Pitt game.
Oh, I get the backyard brawl to myself?
Yep.
Perfect. So, as we've just mentioned, West Virginia is riding about as high as they possibly can. They just put up the best offensive performance, even for an already great offense. They are rolling on every cylinder possible. They don't even need their All-American to put up 100 yards for them to surpass 500 on the ground. They can't be stopped. The defense has rebounded from some bad performances against good passers. Confidence is high. They've just secured the Big East, and now they're ranked 2nd. The BCS is calling their name. With all the turmoil right now, they are in the national championship. They just got to get past 4-7 Pitt. That's all they need to do. It's the last game of their season, and they have it at home. It's not like they're going to Pitt, and it's a pretty fair rivalry. Hence the backyard brawl nickname. It's known for its grittiness and its all-out aggression between opponents. And so West Virginia gets us at home. They get the fans fired up. They know they're about to go to a national championship. They know that this team's the one thing in their way. They're coming out with all their energy, and West Virginia's offense responds with 7 points scored in a 13-9 loss to Pitt to knock them out of BCS national championship conversation. Oh. It's one of the most heartbreaking stories of multiple heartbreaking stories in the 2007 season. In a 2017 interview with West Virginia fullback, what was his name? Owen Schmidt with SB Nation. His direct quote was, "We blew it against the shittiest fucking team in the fucking world," which was the sentiment around all of West Virginia and honestly the rest of the nation. The fact that the most prolific, high-flying offense in football that year scored 7 against a 4-7 Pitt team with no notable grads where you're just like, oh, well, they had a bunch of future pros on there. I can see why they struggled. Nothing of that matter. I mean, the leading tackler was Scott McKillen. Let me know if you ever heard of him before. And it was Pitt. It was Pitt pre-Narduzzi. They didn't have the defense rolling like they usually do. They hardly had an offense, and they messed around and beat the second best team in football. They had a true freshman starting at quarterback, and they won a football game against second-ranked West Virginia. It's one of the biggest anomalies of a season filled with anomalies. And if there was a way to describe it, I guess you could say it's because Pat White got hurt. In the second quarter, he dislocates his thumb on his throwing hand on a QB keeper. And so obviously that becomes problematic for the passing game. And so he has to sit on the sideline, and a sideline reporter was quoted as saying that he looked desperate to get back on the field because he saw how shit was hitting the fan with Jarrett Brown and company trying to right the ship. West Virginia had 3 turnovers in total, and they lost that battle to Pitt. Pitt had just 2. Worst of all, they missed 2 field goals in a game decided by 4 points. Twice this game, West Virginia had the ball in Pitt territory. Oof, that's a hard couple words to say. Had the ball in Pitt territory twice in the fourth quarter, and twice didn't convert on fourth down. And so they lose this game. Pitt takes the last couple seconds off the clock and runs out of the back of the end zone to make it 13-9, which is what the game is forever referred to in the history of the backyard brawl. Pitt and West Virginia fans alike will know what you're talking about if you say what happened the night of 13-9. It's by far the most notable in the series, and honestly the most notable game of 2007. And that is no small order, seeing as how many upsets there were. This was the grandest, the strangest, and had the largest implications on how the season would finish.
Yeah, you just did a perfect summary.
I didn't even use my 30 for 30 voice. I feel like I wasted a chance.
No, that was perfect. And
Mizzou lost this week. They lost to Oklahoma. And so now BCS is run into a frenzy.
Yeah.
It's just which 2-loss team are we picking now?
Yeah, and Ohio State, they eventually lose too. Wait.
Ohio State had already lost to Illinois going into this game.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
They were still at number 3 because their defense was bonkers. And so it wasn't that much of a drop. It was a close loss late in the season. So somehow it got overlooked, but
yeah,
LSU gets that bowl bid, or the BCS National Championship bowl bid, over both Mizzou and West Virginia for losing these games. And of course, we all know how that goes. Les Miles gets his crown.
Finally,
wins the Natty.
In the
weirdest season of college football ever.
Yep, stays on board for quite a lot of seasons. Does essentially nothing. And
never should have been there that long, but he wins one in the wackiest season ever. And LSU's like, cool, stay for like 8 more years.
Yep, pretty much.
Oof, brutal.
Yeah, and I mean, West Virginia.
13 points, won a game against a team who averaged 40. That's all you need to know about how fluky 2007 was.
It really was.
Pitt can play that game 100 more times, and they won't win it again. That was the most unlikely outcome that could have possibly happened. And West Virginia fans have the right to be bitter for the rest of time about it.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, though. I mean, we're looking at the only time in the last the last 20 years that the Mountaineers have come close to the national championship. Like, they win, and they're in.
The only time, period, West Virginia's been close to the national championship.
Yeah, I mean, like the two years prior were just their establishing years. This was their year. And losing this game, ranked number 2 with a sure bid to the BCS National Championship with a win. And Pitt comes to your house and beats you an ugly 13-9. It's quite. There's no words for it. Here's some stats for it to really hammer home. Pitt, to their credit,
They got their one chance and they did what they needed to. Shady McCoy was their running back, as we all know. He was a freshman at this time, ran for 148 on 38 carries. Let me say this again. LaShawn McCoy carried the ball 38 times in this game. They knew who was good. He never scored a touchdown. He was just their bully ball guy.
Gosh.
But the biggest kudos goes to Pitt's defense for the following stat lines. Pat White, 14 attempts, 41 yards. Steve Slayton, 9 attempts, 11 yards. Noel Devine, 7 attempts, 11 yards. So what Pitt did in this game is they implemented the cover zero. And for people at home who aren't familiar with defensive coverages, essentially when you say anything that's cover and then a number, it's the number of guys who are left back in coverage. And so when you play a cover zero, you're essentially playing man, which means the cornerback covers the receiver. On the other side of the field, the cornerback covers his receiver. And then the two safeties are used in a blitz formation. It's essentially like if you played Madden Engage 8, where you're sending just about everyone possible. That's what Pitt did. They were playing a cover zero and essentially said, we'll let Pat White pass if he wants to, but he's not going to run on us. And that's exactly what happened. And they didn't let Pat run on him. They didn't let Slayton run on him. And they didn't let Devine run on him. And somehow Rich Rod didn't have the sensibility to think, pass it before White got hurt. And it was a little bit too little too late once Jarrett Brown was in, because he just couldn't get the job done. The pressure was there. Didn't have the charisma or the arm talent or both to get the job done. Pitt wins that game.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, it was a great strategy.
Perfectly called game. It was a defensive masterpiece. Watching that back, defensive masterpiece. I'm chef's kissing multiple times right now. I look ridiculous, but I'm paying homage to the defensive game plan of this. You know how how seldom just selling out to stop the run works, but against West Virginia, they just picked the day where Rich Rod. You know, in the story of I don't want to mess up my biblical characters, when Moses brings the Israelites out of Egypt, and every time Pharaoh hardens his heart, every time Steve Slayton was stuffed for a loss, Rich Rodriguez hardened his heart and continued to run the ball.
Yeah, it was definitely a rough game for West Virginia,
and Pitt brought on the plagues, but instead of locusts and frogs, it was sacks and tackles for loss.
What great comparisons from Ryan Gregory.
How am I not signed somewhere like ESPN? I know. What a great comp.
What a great comp. I mean, that was on par with Zach's comps that I recently was part of in a Linsanity podcast, where he was comparing NBA players to actors. So
Zach Griffith is an all-timer when it comes to podcast strength.
Absolutely.
Sharp as it comes. Great hair.
Great hair.
Anyways, moving on from the Pitt loss. So obviously West Virginia is going to take a hit in the polls here. And so they go from number 2 to number 11. And they still get an invite to the Fiesta Bowl, take on Oklahoma, who just upset then number 1 Missouri. And so if this just rubs salt in the wound here, given West Virginia's production against Oklahoma, because if Oklahoma could beat Mizzou, had it been Mizzou and West Virginia in the Natty, you have to assume West Virginia was going to just wipe the floor with them.
Yeah.
And that's so heartbreaking that because Pat White hurt his hand and Pitt played the perfect defensive game, they don't get to go win a national championship. That is heartbreaking.
Yep. Instead, they get the Fiesta Bowl against the Sam Bradford-led Oklahoma Sooners.
Why does Oklahoma keep accepting invites to the Fiesta Bowl? A year prior was when Boise State Statue of Liberty the hell out of them and hook and laddered them and embarrassed them in one of the most embarrassing losses in bowl history. And then they come back and they're like, all right, who do we get this time? And the NCAA said, how about you take on one of the most prolific offenses ever? God damn it.
Pretty much. And they failed again, except this time in a much harder fashion. I mean,
48
honestly,
to 28.
Yeah. I mean,
in my notes, I put trouncing. It was a trouncing.
It was definitely a trouncing. And yeah, they had Oklahoma playing catch up almost the entire game. I mean, they got up to a 28-6 lead at half. Oklahoma ensues with two straight scoring drives. So they actually bring the score to 20-15. But then, like, once the West Virginia, offense and defense was even a slightly threatened, as they were, like, in even in the games of the regular season, they just said, no, we're not doing this. We're not. They explode 2 touchdowns, 34-15, and then each team scores just 2 more times, and it was 48-28 final. And there's little doubt in my mind that West Virginia wouldn't have competed in the national title against any of the teams that were there.
So a little bit of a housekeeping for this game. They also beat up on this Oklahoma team that badly. Steve Slayton was out for this game. He hurt his hamstring in the week leading up to it. And if I'm not mistaken, Rich Rod had already resigned and had the Michigan job at least in mind if he hadn't already signed.
No, that's correct. He was gone. This was
they were without
interim
Rich
head
Rod,
coach.
and they were without Rich Rod and they were without Slayton for this game, and they still won by 20 points.
Yeah, Bill Stewart. That was the head coach for this game.
Yeah, that's right. They signed him after this because of how bad they beat him. What a stupid idea that was.
Yeah.
Pat White ran for 150. Noel Devine 108, 2 touchdowns. It was just a regular West Virginia game, which makes that Pitt loss that much more confusing. Like, how does Oklahoma not learn from that and load the box?
Yeah. Oh, well,
you should see the look on my face and how my hands are reached out in desperation right now. How do you not learn from that and just go, oh, cool, Pitt held them to, checks notes, 7 points. We should try that. But instead they're like,
seriously?
No, we'll drop back in pass coverage. And West Virginia said, thank you. And they dropped 48 on them.
Yeah. It was definitely
People say
ugly.
coaching college football is hard. How do you not just, by the time week 6 rolls around, learn from others and play perfect defense? God.
I don't know, honestly. Like, perhaps the 2 best at that is obviously Nick Saban.
Nick Saban. He do be adjusted.
And Davo. I mean, like, I don't know. But
fair point. But anyways, West Virginia wipes the floor with them, ends up finishing the season 11-2. And I think 6th in the coaches poll to finish the season.
Sixth in the final, which is honestly incredibly just no. They were at the very least they were probably the 3rd best team in the country.
Let's look up the final poll for 2007. I want to see how absolutely fucked everything got.
Great idea.
Preseason USC was number 1.
Oh God,
good for them.
I got it. I found it. Well,
we want AP, obviously. So let's scroll.
So we got here. LSU number 1, Georgia
obviously
number 2, Georgia number 2.
Yep.
USC number 3, Missouri number 4, Ohio State number 5, West Virginia number 6, Kansas. Shout out
Kansas.
Number 7, Oklahoma at number 8, Virginia Tech at 9. Boston College. If I'm not mistaken, Matt Ryan's Boston College.
That's
11-3. Texas in their baby years at number 11. Tennessee at 12.
Their baby years. They were 2 years removed from a national championship.
Let me rephrase. Baby Colt years. Baby Colt years. There you go.
Also, West Virginia, you should feel bad. You know who they lost their bowl game to? Kansas.
Yep. Yeah. Then, Florida, shockingly, 9-4 after Tim Tebow wins the Heisman this season.
I hated that Hawaii lost their bowl game this year. I wanted them to be undefeated so bad.
Yeah. And then
Who'd they play?
BYU navigated it.
Okay, they played Georgia. Didn't stand a chance.
That pretty much sums it up. I mean, Cincinnati finished 17.
Wisconsin at 24. Let's not forget that.
Wait, is this what's his name's Hawaii quarterback? What's his name? God, he was so good. Cole Brennan. Yeah, it was Cole Brennan's Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken.
This was Cole. Cole Brennan let him to be undefeated?
I'm pretty sure.
Hold on, let me check their stats for the season.
I could be wrong.
Yep. Led by record-setting quarterback Colt Brennan.
Man. Well.
Yeah, this was a really fun Hawaii team. I couldn't name a single other person on this team.
Yeah, pretty much. Illinois, they finished 20th.
Oregon finished the season 9-4 and ranked 23rd.
Yep. And then
that feels bad.
Their best friends, Oregon State, they finished 25th. And notably, South Florida finished the season unranked after being number 2 in the country.
Ranked.
At one point. And Arkansas finished unranked with that.
Let's not say number 2 in the country at some point, like USC started hot and ended up pissing it away. South Florida was second at week 7 and managed to just piss it away so hard they were unranked by the end of it.
Yeah, interestingly enough, they lost to UConn, they lost to Rutgers, and they lost to Cincinnati. All teams West Virginia beat, but I'm pretty sure they dismantled Pitt. So
they put a hurting on Pitt.
Yeah, interesting how the script flips.
How the turntables.
It's yeah. I just watched that episode.
All right, so we may as well get to the aftermath here. So both Pat White and Steve Slayton were juniors this season. Pat White chooses to return. Steve Slayton skips the senior season and heads to the NFL. So we'll start with Slayton. He was a 3rd-round pick by the Texans. He only ran a 4.45 in the 40, hence his slip. Anyone with his kind of production would at least be a 2nd-round talent, but didn't put up that production that coaches were looking for. And he showed signs of being worth it as a rookie, but a shoulder injury kind of derailed that as a sophomore in the league, not in college, obviously. And so he gets waived, gets picked out by the Dolphins at one point, never makes the final roster, flirts with the Canadian League, and is done with football within a couple of years of being out of West Virginia. And it was an unfortunately similar path for Pat White. Leaves West Virginia as a 2-time Big East Offensive Player of the Year. In his senior season, he plays even better. He throws for 1,800 yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 picks, rushes for almost 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. So obviously, without Rich Rod there, the rushing influence is not nearly as heavy, but he still gets the damn thing done. And I think they were transitioning into more of a traditional spread at this point. And so he was asked to throw the ball more, and he still rushed for 970 yards. And so he leaves West Virginia with 6,000 passing yards and 4,500 rushing yards. Just Vic-like level changing of the game.
Yep.
And so he's a 2nd-round pick by, ironically, Miami. And we all remember that hit he took from Ike Taylor where his brain went through the bottom of his spine, and it was one of the most brutal things I've ever seen. And so naturally, he was a little shaken after that, and eventually gets waived by the Dolphins, and much like Slayton, flirts with the Canadian League, retires from football a couple years later, probably because his brain was still messed up. That was one of the most brutal things I've ever seen. Anyone listening at home that hasn't seen Pat White getting hit by Ike Taylor, please go look it up just so you can see, like, oh, yeah, I probably wouldn't remember how to do things anymore if I got hit like that. He probably woke up and couldn't read. Like, it was that kind of a hit.
Yeah.
And right now he's the running backs coach at, ironically, South Florida. He just got hired.
I thought I saw a thing that recently. I thought I saw a thing that West Virginia. No, maybe they didn't. No. Oh wait, no, it was. Yeah, sorry, you're right. That is pretty ironic, though.
The team that dashed his hopes early. It would only be worse if he was a running back coach at Pitt. That's the only way to make this worse.
Yeah, that's fair.
But one of the two teams that derailed him during his best season of college football, he's like, yeah, I'll come work for y'all.
Oh, maybe it was the hit. Maybe he forgot about that game.
That's awful.
and then to sum up, Noel Divine, he ended up
turned out to be a beast.
Yeah, he ended up being a beast. 1,200 yards the next year for only 4 touchdowns on the ground. Again, the switch of the offense. And then the year after that, he finally has his complete breakthrough with 1,400 yards and 13 touchdowns. He goes to the combine. He has, he had a great high school career.
4.28.
Yeah.
4.28 40.
4.28. Great both high school and college career. But even then, his
in the pros.
Yeah. He had a poor senior season. Not fully on him, but regardless, he was only
should have left
projected.
when Rich Rod did. Sorry.
Yeah, he should have. No, he should have. He was projected to only be a 7th round pick. He didn't get drafted. He was signed by the Eagles, waived by the Eagles, and then, just like his old buddies, he flirted with the Canadian Football League. But unfortunately, unlike them, he didn't have much success. He fumbled 6 times in 6 games with the Alouettes.
Oof.
And
oh no, that'll get you cut.
Yeah. And eventually got released. He tried out. He signed with the Edmonton Eskimos, and then eventually made his way to the Spring League of 2017. So he was still trying to get into the NFL, but fortunately, things just didn't work out.
Think about what that has to do to your mentality. Like, superstar in high school, 5-star recruit, go to one of the best offenses ever, put up crazy numbers in college, and then have scouts tell you, yeah, probably a 7th round pick, fringe guy, hope you can make a roster at some point. That's got to mess with your head.
It really does.
Be like, what else could I do? And the scouts are probably like, don't be 5'8".
Yeah. Don't be 5'8". Yeah, that's fair. Most small backs don't have much of a chance.
That was the unfortunate case for Slayton, too. Slayton was fairly small as well.
Yeah, they definitely liked their small backs. And for Divine, he's still 32. I'm not saying he's making anything, but he's still 32, so he's still pretty young.
Man, someone that played college ball in 2007 is 32 now.
Yeah,
I hate that a lot.
It sounds crazy.
Ugh.
It really does.
God, I'm going to be old here soon.
Yeah, we're all almost some old men, but
man, this is not a great way to end the pod.
No, we got it. I got it.
It's a stark reminder of the totality of time.
It's all right. Because at the end of the day, it was a wild season for the Mountaineers. From the misty taste of moonshine after a tough loss to a teardrop in their eye as their title aspirations withered away.
Oh, my God.
Despite dark and dusty being painted on the sky.
Here he goes.
All the memories gather around this team. Yes. The 2007 Mountaineers will forever be remembered as a team that almost reached heaven, but ended up taking the long country road home.
I'm glad you got that in, man.
Yeah. That wraps up this podcast. I had a great time, Ryan. I think this turned out to be everything we expected it to be. It was a long one, but it was well worth it. A lot of preparations into this one. And
great team that we both love. And I also got a suggestion from this one from one of my high school friends.
What's that?
we should be. Yeah, shout out to my friend Seth, who said that we should be listening or not listening. We should be talking about this team, and so it was a highly requested. It's been the only request that we've gotten. So
yeah, it was definitely a fun team to cover. Definitely.
So Devin, a closing question.
Yeah,
a closing question. Have you ever had moonshine before?
I have. Not pure moonshine, but it was
it's not fun.
Butter pecan, and it was some of the tastiest hard drink I've ever had. And I did put some in my coffee from time to time. Nice.
I had apple pie moonshine one time, and I drank the entire jar and forgot how to walk. It was quite a time.
Man, yeah. Moonshine's definitely it can mess with you, man.
Yeah, for all our Mountaineer fans out there, be careful.
For all
with
Mountaineer fans.
Y'all are essentially drinking gasoline. Let's dial it back.
Well, I gotta love the moonshine. Gotta love the moonshine. It's strong, whatever. But yeah, this is a great podcast. We definitely
this pod was almost heaven.
Yeah, it was almost heaven. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I pretty much said everything I can about it.
So thank you for listening, everybody. Again, as we've had one suggestion now, we always welcome suggestions in our DMs on Twitter, or if you know us personally, go ahead and just shoot us a text or something like that. On Twitter, you can find me at Ryan_Gregory_, both spelled the way you'd think. What about you, Devin?
Yeah, you can find me at Devin with an I, Voss23 on Twitter. And following that, we will have a state of college football podcast.
Oh, yeah, we should have dropped this at the top. Oh, well.
It's all right. We will be...
Our true fans are listening to this point.
Yes, our true fans are still listening. We will be dropping a state of college football podcast. We're just going to be discussing just kind of everything that's happening. We've waited this far because we're trying to play the wait game, see what's going to end up happening. A little ACC action today. Notre Dame's canceling some practices, so I don't know. We're going to see what happens there, but yeah, that's definitely in the works. It's going to be in the works. We're going to get that out. And
a little behind the curtain for all our listeners. We had plans at almost every time something massive broke, like a player opting out or a conference canceling, that we were like, okay, cool. And we started gathering information on it, planning out a time to podcast. And then by the time that we decided to, something else would break. And we'd have to go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, we'll talk about this, this, and this, and recreated notes. And then something else would break. And so at this point, we're waiting until the final gavel has dropped and we can definitively give everyone who listens and gives a shit about this at a very to the point, and we can guarantee accurate who's playing, who's not, and all of that, just so that we're not starting every podcast by stating, so we got this wrong last time, but this time here's what we know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, up until this point, we got some, Big Ten canceled, obviously, Pac-12 canceled. The other three Major 5 conferences are still in the works.
Today's August 19th. Yeah, it's late at night at August 19th, and this is the extent of what we know.
Yep, this is the extent of what we know. A couple group of 5 conferences canceled, some of them still going. So there's going to be a lot of implications there. We will discuss it, and I think that pretty much wraps up this podcast.
All right, guys. I appreciate y'all listening.
Yep. Have a great day to all those listening.
And if you're of age, go drink some moonshine for our good old Mountaineers and for the season that was lost.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw indeed.